Islam's shot against Charles Oliveira was arguably the best fight the company could put on. A spiritual heir to the ill-fated Tony versus Khabib. A suffocating, unstoppable machine steamrolling the competition, going in against a dynamic whirlwind known for delivering thunderclap finishes. What was less obvious was that the build-up or the mental aspect of the fight would be at all interesting. I don't want to disrespect either guy, but you've got Charles Oliveira, one of the more respectful and likable guys in the sport, going up against Islam Makhachev, who's not exactly an energetic or colorful speaker. On the long list of things I would have expected to enjoy more than Islam and Charles trading insults, with things like listening to the insufferable cadence of Def Jam poetry from the early noughties. And that would have been exactly right. I mean, if verbal shots were fired, those shots were coming from water pistols. But what made it interesting was the degree to which it legitimately seemed to affect Charles. He was very defensive in the lead-up. It was unusual. Initially, Charles had no desire to fight Islam. He had just tore through one of the more impressive years we've ever seen. 12 months, 3 bloody victories over consecutive top 5 opponents, finishing all 3. As a late bloomer, Charles had described how he turned his career around upon the arrival of his daughter.
It was all about the birth of my daughter.
Yeah.
When she came, I thought that I must give her a better life, I must make money, I must win, I must make it all happen for her. And since then, you guys see what's going on.
So considering the man's priorities as a father and the nature of the year he just put down, he felt it was an opportune time to pick off a big money fight. Now, I don't blame the guy. He's looking for that generational wealth. I mean, one fight with McGregor, and you could take the whole favela to Disneyland. You could dye every head in Brazil white with that kind of money.
Well, I'm gonna defend my belt, and I want to face Conor McGregor, but the UFC may have different plans, but the champion has a name, it's Charles Oliveira.
But McGregor's comeback stalled, and emphasis shifted towards Islam, with one stipulation. Charles wanted a homecoming.
So that's the fight Islam wants, but Khabib's always saying that they want to fight in Brazil, so if they want to come to Brazil, let's make it happen. I want to fight Conor in Brazil because that's the real money fight, but if they want to travel down to Brazil, I'm down for it.
This is where things kind of went sideways. As we know, Khabib was vocal on the subject. He seemed more than happy for Islam to fight in Brazil, but he added some comments that really set the tone for the whole thing.
This is not like Islam or Khabib organization. UFC, they have owners. They make this decision. Okay, if they say Brazil, we love this. Come to Brazil, fight with Brazilian champion and finish him with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu style. I think I really believe Islam can finish him on the ground. I really believe this. Okay, you guys gonna now you guys gonna judge me because I believe to Islam, but who cares? Who cares? If they say Brazil, okay, let's go Brazil. I fight one time in São Paulo.
Thiago Tavares?
Yes, Thiago Tavares. It was very short fight, 1.5 minutes. Boom. Before fight, everybody say I'm gonna die. After fight, everybody take picture with me. It's gonna be same thing with Islam and Charles Oliveira.
A little disrespectful, but nothing crazy. Khabib was basically backing his fighter and their style, but Charles felt the idea of placing one martial art above another was classless.
Te surpreende o fato do Khabib, que nunca foi trash talk, agora que não é lutador, tá falando, não vou dizer trash talk, mas tá falando mais do que costumava?
Acho que o cara foi campeão, 29 vitórias seguidas, nunca falou nada, sempre vendeu a luta numa, bem pra caraca, e hoje vive falando pra caramba, falando bastante, sempre falava, vou falar o seguinte, eu vou bater no Islam Makhachev e vou desafiar o Khabib para ir voltar da aposentadoria.
Perfeito. Última...
Essa é a luta que todo mundo vai querer ver, né? Isso não vai querer ver. Todo mundo fala que o Khabib é um dos caras que é duro pra caralho, eu respeito pra caralho, mas ultimamente vem falando pra caraca.
That frosty dynamic continued, with Charles eventually concluding their whole team was cocky, and that hubris would be their downfall.
A arrogância deles vai matar eles. A arrogância, tanto de empresário como de ex-lutador. A arrogância vai matar eles, vai matar vocês, vai afundar vocês. Vocês estão falando um monte de besteira, vocês estão criticando, vocês estão falando um monte de coisa e eu tô só na minha, levando, respeitando, como eu sempre respeitei todos vocês.
Во-первых, как можно пренебрегать соперником, который стал лучший боец года 2022 года? В 2022 же он лучший боец стал. Никто же его этим не пренебрегает. И 11 побед подряд, столько финишей. Просто скажи, в каком интервью мы его относились к нему высокомерно. Мы всегда его назвали чемпионом. И если мы говорим, что мы его хотим выиграть досрочно, завершить досрочно этот бой. Я не вижу, что здесь есть какое-то высокомерие. Нормально все. Я не вижу, что здесь есть какое-то высокомерие. У нас есть план. Мы хотим его выиграть досрочно. Я думаю, что у Чарльза тоже есть план. Он тоже хочет финишировать Ислама.
What Khabib is saying there is basically true. You know, they were generally respectful of Charles' achievements and skills. They were just very dismissive of Charles' chances against Islam. And that's just part of the whole sport. I guess you do have to consider who Khabib is. The man cast an enormous shadow over the division, retired undefeated, legitimate superstar status. So even though the words were not exactly lethal, you could understand if they carried some extra weight for Charles. And there's just no arguing, it really seemed to wobble the guy. Later, there were some harsher comments made.
Charles is very good, you know, he have good win streak, he beat a lot of tough opponents, but for me this is embarrassing when UFC Lightweight Champion, he tried to call Diaz McGregor, but he forget my name. UFC tell him, hey, if you not take this fight, we're gonna give some chance to Michael Chandler. That's why he take this fight, you know.
But probably the most scathing thing that came from Islam was that Charles' record wasn't befitting of a champion. Now this clip is hilarious. Look at the way Cormier laughs at the very end here. I wish I could laugh like this at least once a week. Cormier is giggling like a grown-ass baby.
How long?
People finish him 7 times, but the UFC, some guys finish him 7 times.
Fighters
And
can
this
grow
guy
to
champion.
Islam.
And this guy champion in my division. I'm very upset because.
So what you're saying is this: Islam Makhachev at the Abu Dhabi will be the lightweight champion of the world.
But Charles took a similar shot at Islam's career, saying his record wasn't befitting of a contender, and that his title shot was basically a function of nepotism.
I think Islam deserves all the respect in the world, but I think he should have fought somebody maybe in the top 5 like I did. Not just, surf on someone else's wave and, skip the line like he did.
When you say surf on someone's wave, are you referring to Khabib's name?
For sure. This fight is only happening because of him. If it was any other guy, he would have had to walk the walk that I had to walk. Knocking on people's doors, trying to get into a top 5. The reason why this fight's happening is because of him. That's the real.
Overall, though, not a build-up you'd have expected either guy to have taken too personally. The thing is, for Charles, there were compounding factors. Things seemed to stack up against him. Charles wanted a money fight. Islam wanted a title shot, and Islam got his way. Charles wanted a well-earned homecoming in Brazil, but instead, he got the exact opposite. Instead, Islam got a homecoming in Abu Dhabi, which again is exactly what he wanted.
Islam Makhachev is getting the world title shot in Abu Dhabi. Now, Charles Oliveira wanted it in Brazil. How did you guys get it in Abu Dhabi?
Who cares what he wants, He cannot make decision, Islam cannot make decision. But Abu Dhabi, it's our territory, brother.
I always invite them to come to my house. They never come to my house, so I knock on people's doors and go to theirs.
So it seemed like they were treating Charles like the challenger, and Islam like he was a defending champion. And then you've got Khabib's hyper-confidence looming over proceedings. So it was odd to watch, but I think when you look at things in context, you can understand why Charles was a little thrown by the whole thing. He repeatedly referred to himself as the lion, but it did seem like he may have really felt like the underdog, with the odds stacking up against him. He went as far as to say he intended to shock the world, as if the mere idea of him winning was somehow shocking.
I'm gonna shock the world yet again.
You think shock the world? Really? I feel like people are coming around on you. I feel like people are high on you.
Anyway, I'm not trying to draw any conclusions about Oliveira's mindset, except to say that whatever mental warfare there was did seem to make Charles a little uncomfortable. The most interesting part of the build-up was obviously the discussion of the matchup itself. Charles felt he had a clear advantage on the feet and warned Islam about going to the ground. Now, Oliveira is extremely proud of having the most submissions in the UFC. He feels that record puts his name in the history books.
Well, the ground is his turf, so he will definitely try to do that. But if he does, will he want to do and bring down the best submitter in the history of UFC? I'm not sure.
For that reason, Islam was totally focused on submitting Charles. He wanted to take the reputation Charles had built over a decade and add that as a major feather in his own grappling cap.
This is my goal,
finish him in the ground because I have to show all people my grappling level.
Beyond all the talking, it was just a huge fight. We all knew how it would be framed for Islam. It would be about what had come to be known as Father's Plan, which, in combination with Abdulmanap's untimely passing, had taken on a very sentimental life of its own. Abdulmanap had taken a small group of boys from total obscurity in the isolated hills of a tiny mountain village to being culturally significant modern symbols of Dagestan's combative history. It's an incredible story, legendary in Dagestan, and the last clear vision he gave the world about how things should proceed for that group of kids was the following.
Думаю, Ислам может выиграть остальных. Более голодный, который должен прийти на замену Хабибу. И при этом я подтверждаю класс своего тренерского умения. Значит, Хабиб уходит без проигрыша, и тут появляется новый чемпион, опять мой.
The ultimate validation of his life's work. Now, that seems like a lot of pressure for Islam, but he never appeared burdened by it. Instead, it seemed he viewed it as his inevitable destiny.
Думаю, мне суждено стать им. Если суждено, я буду чемпионом. Если это не суждено, если это не мое, значит чем-то лучшим.
For Charles, he had won a vacant belt left by the greatest lightweight of all time. So his reign began in Khabib's shadow, but it was such a sensational streak of devastating ultra-violence that people were already having the GOAT discussion.
The greatest lightweight of all time, though? I think if Charles beats Islam this weekend, I think that belongs to Charles now.
So for many, the gap between the two was already narrow. And although he couldn't challenge Khabib, in Islam, he had the next best thing. Islam has many of the same tools as Khabib. They both started under Abdulmanap. They have similar Sambo credentials, and they both later honed their skills in AKA. Islam was Abdulmanap's favorite student, and he was the only man Mendes said could take rounds off Khabib in a gym. He was the heir apparent. On top of all that, Khabib was now his coach and would be in his corner. So while a win over Islam is not a win over Khabib, it would be a win over much of what Khabib represented, and it would make that growing Oliveira-Khabib debate far more compelling. This fight wasn't just about the two men in the cage. Ultimately, it would impact the perception of three careers and the legacy of Abdulmanap. There was a lot in the line here. Unfortunately for Charles, things couldn't have gone much worse. The advantage he envisioned on the feet just didn't exist. Islam quickly gained his respect throwing kill shots. Midway through the second, he knocked Charles down with a beautiful right hook, and Oliveira's deadly submission game that had frozen some prior opponents was just not a factor. Vicious knockdown, rapid submission. With almost no resistance, Islam had shattered one of the greatest streaks in lightweight history, and did so in the most deflating manner. You know, knowing the road that Charles took to get here, it was hard to watch him going down like that. And when you consider his icy perception of the build-up and his circumstances of the fight, the odds stacked up against him in hostile territory, you could easily forgive Charles for being frustrated, or for taking this loss extremely personally. But regardless of all that, he was an exceptional loser here.
We saw Khabib go up to you after and have a conversation after the fight. What exactly did he tell you?
He came up to me and just basically said that everything was just promoting the fight, that he had respect for me, and I mean, he is a great champion. He has an amazing journey in the sport, and now he has a great champion next to him. And all he was doing is basically saying that he respects me and that it was all part of the game, and that's what it is.
Islam, of course, dedicated the victory to Abdulmanap, whose final vision was now a reality.
This my belt for my coach, Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov. Him and his father make me, I know.
Realistically, though, for Abdulmanap, making that prediction at that point was the easy part. The hard part, which is almost hard to wrap your head around, was everything that preceded that prediction. We've never quite seen anything like it. The closest I can remember is when GSP was champion and Rory MacDonald who was also in TriStar, looked poised to succeed him. But Rory was already a 5-0 professional and was one of the best prospects in Canada when he got to TriStar. The famous TriStar name attracted Canada's elite talent. So that was Canada's best coaches meeting Canada's best fighters. And even though Rory never quite got the belt, it was still amazing. Another example was AKA with Cormier and Kane. They were two of the best heavyweights when Kane was champ, and Cormier was subsequently a champ in 2 divisions. But again, as incredible as that was, AKA's reputation selected for the best fighters in the world. Cormier was an Olympic medalist when he walked through their doors. What happened at UFC 280 just seems an order of magnitude stranger, because Abdulmanap, he didn't have that. The best fighters in Dagestan weren't flocking to his gym, and he didn't have world-class facilities. He was just working with the local kids. His students were selected more on the basis of proximity to his house than they were on the basis of elite talent. Islam just lived a couple doors away. But out of that tiny group of kids, Abdulmanap produced the first fighter to retire as an undefeated champion. Now following in Khabib's footsteps, in the most stacked division in the sport, is Islam Makhachev. And another generation follows, with guys like Usman and Umar. The best MMA gyms in the world struggle to produce this level of success when they have the most talented prospects in the country kicking down their doors. And yet, Abdulmanap's 2 best fighters have so far been about as close to perfect as we've ever seen. It is shocking. So when you think about it, Father's plan was the least mysterious part of the whole thing. It's when you wind things back to the very humble beginning of their story, you realize when Islam snatched that belt from beyond the grave, Abdulmanap gave us one of the most bizarre and remarkable coaching achievements in the sport's history. The night Khabib retired was very much the perfect eulogy for his father.
It was my last fight, and no way I'm gonna come here without my father. I know you're great, man. I know how you take care of your close people. I know a lot of things about you. Be close with your parents, because you never know what's gonna happen tomorrow. You never know.
The only reason I stuck here is to give this man praises. And I know he made his father so proud.
But Abdulmanap was exactly right. The night Islam picked up the belt was the ultimate validation of his life's work.